I've handled over 2,000 bodies in 29 years. I know what's inside a human chest cavity: lungs, heart, the great vessels, maybe a pacemaker if the cardiologist got there first. I know what a trocar hits and what it doesn't. What I pulled out of Dale Colburn was not supposed to be there. Not inside him, not inside anyone. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The funeral home sits on Spruce Hill, about a quarter-mile up from the harbor. Victorian. My uncle converted it in 1971, took out the parlor walls, built a chapel where the dining room was, put the prep room in the basement where the root cellar used to be. You walk in and the first thing that hits you is the smell. Not bad, just specific. Old pine, cleaning solution, and whatever the fog drags in off the water. Some mornings the formaldehyde mixes with the salt air and it's almost sweet. I stopped noticing it around year 3. I inherited the place from my uncle. He died in the prep room. Stroke, 1985. I was 24 years old and I'd been assisting him for 2 years. He dropped the trocar and hit the floor, and I finished the case he was working on before I called anyone. Because that's what he taught me. You finish the case. The living can wait. The dead can't. 29 years I ran that place alone. Well, mostly alone. Carl helped with transport and the heavy lifting, setting up the chapel, carrying flowers. But he didn't come downstairs. That was my department. Dale Colburn came in on a Tuesday, October. Harbor fog so thick you couldn't see the breakwater from the front porch. Hospital transport dropped him off around 2 in the afternoon. Cardiac arrest, pronounced at the scene. His wife found him on the porch in his rocking chair with a cup of coffee still warm in his hand. 71 years old, retired lobsterman. Big man, 220, maybe 230. Hands like catcher's mitts. Salt and pepper beard that his wife asked me to trim but not shave. Family wanted a viewing Thursday evening and burial Friday morning. Standard schedule. Gave me plenty of time. I did the intake myself. Always did. Logged him in as case 2003-44. Photographed the body. Checked the death certificate. Cardiac arrest. No autopsy ordered. Attending physician signed off. Under surgical history, none. Under implants, none. No pacemaker. No stents. No joint replacements. 71 years old, and the man had apparently never been cut open. I prepped the table. Mixed my arterial fluid. I used a medium index solution, 2%, standard for a well-nourished adult with decent circulation. Set out the trocar, the aspirator, the hemostats, turned on the overhead fluorescents. Down in that basement, with the stone walls and the one high window, the light was always a little blue, like being underwater. I started the arterial injection through the right common carotid, raised the artery, made my incision, inserted the cannula. Good flow. I drained from the right jugular. The blood came out dark, thick, normal for someone who'd been dead about 18 hours. I ran 2 gallons of solution, and the distribution was even. No blockages, no swelling. His color came up nice, good case. The whole time the building was quiet, October quiet. Carl had gone home. The fog pressed against that high window like something leaning on the glass. Every now and then the pipes ticked. Old building. You learn its noises. I moved to cavity aspiration, standard procedure. You take the trocar, long hollow needle connected to the aspirator by tubing, and you go in through the standard entry point, 2 inches above and 2 inches left of the navel. You aspirate the abdominal organs first, stomach, intestines, bladder, remove the gases, remove the fluids. Then you move up to the thoracic cavity, lungs, pericardial sac. Abdomen went fine. Textbook. I repositioned the trocar upward, angled toward the chest, and it hit something, not bone. I know what bone feels like through a trocar. It stops you hard, like tapping a wall. This was different. The trocar stopped, then slid a 1/4 inch, like it had hit something that gave just slightly before holding firm, and the vibration came up through the handle into my hand. A high, thin vibration, metal on metal. I pulled the trocar back, reinserted at a slightly different angle. Hit it again. Same spot. Left side of the chest, behind the sternum, maybe 2 inches deep in the tissue. I stood there in that basement with my hand on the trocar, and I listened to the building tick around me, the fog on the window, the aspirator humming. I checked the death certificate one more time. Under implants, none. Something was inside Dale Colburn's chest that the hospital didn't know about, that his doctor didn't know about, that his wife of 43 years had never mentioned. And it was made of metal. I should have called someone. County coroner, the hospital, someone with authority and a better explanation than mine. But I didn't. Because I'm a funeral director, and funeral directors solve problems in the prep room. That's what the room is for. I set the trocar aside and got my scalpel, made a small incision, maybe 2 inches, along the left intercostal space between the 4th and 5th ribs, just enough to get my hand in. The tissue was well embalmed by then, firm but workable. I spread the incision with a retractor and reached in with a pair of long hemostats. It took me 3 tries to get a grip on it. Whatever it was sitting behind the sternum, nestled against the pericardium like it belonged there. Smooth, flat, about the size of a $50. I clamped the hemostats and pulled. It came out clean. No adhesion, no scar tissue around it, no encapsulation. And that's the part that didn't make sense. Anything that's been inside a body long enough gets encapsulated. The body walls it off, builds a little cocoon of tissue around it. That's how you know a foreign object has been there for years versus hours. This had nothing. The tissue around it was clean and uniform, like the object had always been part of him, or like it had arrived after he died. I held it under the fluorescent light and my hand was shaking. Not a lot. Just enough that I had to set the hemostats down on the table and use both hands. It was a brass toe tag. Standard mortuary identification tag, the kind you clip to the big toe during intake. Oval, about 1.5 inches long. Brass. Stamped, not engraved. I've used them for 29 years. I order them from the same supply company in Ohio, but this one was already stamped. The funeral home name across the top, Spruce Hill Memorial. My funeral home. My name is on the license that hangs in the front hallway. Case number 2347. I looked at my intake log, still open on the counter. Dale Colburn. Case 2344. The case I was currently working on. 2345 hadn't been assigned. 2346 hadn't been assigned. 2347 was 3 cases away. The date stamped below the case number, June 14th, 2015. It was October 2014. This tag was dated 8 months in the future. And the name, the decedent's name, stamped in the space where I stamp every name for every body that comes through my door. It was my name. My full legal name. First, middle, last. Correct spelling. The middle name that I never use, that most people in town don't even know. It was right there in the brass. I put the tag on the counter next to my intake log. I stood there for, 5 minutes, 10. The aspirator was still humming. The fog was still on the window. The building ticked and settled the way it always does. You know what I did? I finished the embalming. I injected the cavity fluid. I sutured the trocar entry point and the incision I'd made. I washed Dale Colburn and I dried him and I dressed him in the blue suit his wife brought in. I combed his beard. I did my job. Because that's what my uncle taught me, and that's what I know how to do when nothing else makes sense. Then I went back to the tag. I examined it under the magnifier I use for cosmetic work. The stamping was clean, sharp edges, not worn, not corroded. It looked new. It looked like I had stamped it that morning, except I hadn't, and the date on it was 8 months from now, and the name on it was mine. I checked Dale Colburn's chest one more time. The incision I'd sutured, clean, No other entry point, no old scars, no healed surgical sites. There was no way to put something behind a man's sternum without cutting through bone and tissue, and Dale Colburn had never been cut. His skin told that story clearly. I'd examined every inch of him during intake. It wasn't planted by the hospital. The body came in a sealed bag with an intact seal tag that I logged and photographed. It wasn't planted by Carl. Carl doesn't go in the prep room, and Carl doesn't know where I keep my toe tags. I opened my desk drawer, the bottom one with the lock. I put the tag inside. I locked it. I put the key in my pocket. I went home. I sat in my kitchen and I ate a sandwich I couldn't taste, and I stared at the wall until it got dark. Then I drove back to the funeral home at 4 in the morning, unlocked the front door, went downstairs, unlocked the drawer. The tag was still there. Same case number, same date, same name. I locked the drawer again and went upstairs to the chapel and sat in the back pew until the sun came up through the stained glass my uncle installed in 1973. Colburn's viewing was Thursday at 6. His wife held my hand and told me he looked like he was sleeping. I said thank you. That's what I always say. Burial was Friday morning. Baptist Cemetery, up the hill from the harbor. Fog again. I watched them lower the casket and thought about what was locked in my desk drawer 30 feet below the chapel floor. After the burial, I went back to the prep room, opened the intake log. Case 2344, Colburn, closed. 2345 would be whoever came next. Then 2346. Then 2347. I did the math. I averaged about 1 case a week, sometimes 2 in a busy week, sometimes none, but roughly 1 per week. 3 cases from now, at that pace, would put case 2347 somewhere around late October, early November. But the tag said June 14, 2015, 8 months out. That math didn't work unless I slowed down, and that's exactly what I did. Not on purpose, not at first. The next call came Monday. Elderly woman, natural causes. Case 2345. My hand shook through the entire cavity aspiration. Every time the trocar touched anything, rib, cartilage, normal tissue resistance, my whole body locked up. Took me twice as long as it should have. I started referring cases to Lawson's in Rockport, the out-of-town calls, the hospital referrals, anyone who didn't specifically ask for me. 2346 sat unassigned in my log for 3 weeks. Then a local family came in and I couldn't say no. Case 2346. Done. Next body through my door would be 2347. January by then. 5 months until June 14. That's when the pipe burst in the basement. Plumber had to open the west wall, the old stone foundation where my uncle had done some work back in the 70s. Behind the stones, bricked into a cavity, they found a leather-bound logbook, my uncle's handwriting, embalming records from 1962 to 1985, every case he ever handled. I didn't even know this book existed. I had records starting from when I took over in '85, but his originals had been missing since he died. I sat at the kitchen table and read every page. Standard entries. Case number, name, date, fluid type. Hundreds of them. Neat handwriting that got shakier in the last few years. Except 4 entries had a word in the margin. Same word, different years. 1967, 1971, 1978, 1984. The word was found. That's it. No explanation, no additional notes. Just found in the margin next to 4 case numbers spread across 22 years. His last entry was April 3rd, 1985. Case 1184, the day he died. Stroke in the prep room. I was there. I watched him fall. And in the margin next to case 1184, in handwriting that barely held together, the same word, found. I closed the book. I went downstairs. I unlocked the drawer. The tag was there. But the case number had changed. It read 2346, not 2347, 2346. The case I'd already completed, The number had gone backward. The date was the same, June 14th, 2015. My name was the same. I picked it up and I looked at it for a long time under the fluorescent light that makes everything look like it's already dead. The brass was warm. It shouldn't have been warm. It was in a locked drawer in a stone basement in January in Maine. It should have been cold enough to sting. I sold the funeral home 6 weeks later, transferred my license, let the new owners take the building, the equipment, the chapel, the furniture, the desk, the drawer. I left the tag in there. I didn't tell them about it. I didn't tell anyone about it. June 14th, 2015, I stayed inside my apartment in Portland, and I didn't answer the phone. Nothing happened. I woke up on June 15th, and I was alive, and I didn't understand why that surprised me. It's been years now. I'm fine. I'm retired. I don't go near funeral homes. I don't go near brass or formaldehyde or stainless steel tables. But some nights when the fog comes in off Casco Bay and the air gets that salt and chemical smell that reminds me of the prep room, I put my hand on the left side of my chest, right over the ribs, fourth intercostal space, and I press, just to make sure there's nothing in there that shouldn't be. I never feel anything.